guitar tone is an endless journey to find your voice. So we designed Paradise to give you the keys to a studio full of classic tube amps, speaker cabs, stomp boxes, and effects. I'm James Santiago, and today I'll be showing you around. Okay, so let me give you a quick overview of how Paradise works. What we have at the center of all of this is the amp and cab. That's always sort of the main thing you look at. And on the screen here, you'll notice in the center is the amp and the cab. Much like a guitar setup, you've got things in front of the amp, and then if you were recording, things that go after the cabinet and mic. So on screen here, you can see to the left here, I've got myself a nice little tape delay in front of the amp. There's the amp and cab and mic, and then our post section. If I wanted to put a nice big panning sort of delay thing or studio quality reverb, I'd put it in this area. Any one of these empty boxes is a chance for me to go crazy. I can put all sorts of fun distortion overdrives in there, fuzzes, flangers, phasers, choruses, compressors, delays. And any one of the things I put up here, that same list of effects is also available in post. So it's not like I only get one shot at using the spring. I could put one in front or one in back. You also have 5 slots in front and 5 slots in back. And that's not to say you're going to use them all, but maybe you want to set up this sound with this kind of amp on 10, but every once in a while you might want to turn on that TS overdrive just to boost it. So you can just leave things in the slots and kind of have them ready for yourself. At the very end here, I have a limiter, which that's just to save you from clipping your DAW. So not really an effect, but it comes in pretty useful. So I think the next thing you do is actually dig into some of the amps. I'll look at a few pedals on how to drive the amps, and then we'll tear apart some signal paths. All right, let's take a look at the amps that come with Paradise. So inside this little box, I can actually see all 6 of the amps that come with it. Dream 65, you've got Enigmatic 82, Lion 68, Ruby 63, Showtime 64, and then Woodrow 55. You can see I'm actually on the Dream 65 at the moment. You'll notice Dream 65 here and our S-Verb, which is kind of inspired by the Super Reverb 410 cabinet. Now, if I decide to kind of veer off of that, any one of the cabinets from the other amps we've done are all available to you now. So if you want to use a D-style cabinet from Enigmatic with your Dream, you can do that now. You can pull a Vox cabinet, sort of vintage sound, onto sort of your big 100-watt plexi tone. You can now mix and match whatever you want. So as I go through this list, you can kind of go crazy with anything. So you've got a lot more cabin mic options now. And much like the pedals, this also includes all the alternate features that were hidden on the second pages of some of those pedals or in the app only. Everything's kind of in front of you now. So 2 things I like about this is getting to the bright switch on this and also the boost. So I've got this set up now where you can see on screen, there's a little bit of boost. It's in the lead mode. And one fun thing I can do is I can just turn off the bright here or enable it. You can immediately hear how snappy that is. Now, I've done 2 things to fix this for sort of record-ready tones, and they're in post here. A little bit of EQ, and I'm actually taking out a little low mids that makes it thumpy, and 1176 compression, which is giving me a really good snap for funk stuff. If I take out the compressor, still cool, but this gives it some extra snap. So what makes it chewy is the phaser. This is in front of the amp, so it's going to get crunchy in front of the Dream 65 sort of preamp section. So let's get this turned on. Now, one other thing I can do with this is sort of exaggerate that. We can turn the amp up a little more, and like we talked about before, any other cabs available to me from other products. So I can decide maybe I want to try sort of the modern blue speakers out of the Ruby. So let's pull that up. Here's another secret. Originally, the pedal, because it had spring reverb, didn't need the room sound. We actually have given it to you here. So the room sound is now available. So I can turn off the spring. Let's make it dry. And I can go over here and turn up room right next to the cabinet. And I've still got the reverb. All right, so let's move from the Dream 65 to something that is kind of, unique. It's just, you can make it your own. There's a lot of things under the hood. It's actually 4 amps in one with all these circuits you could change. And for the first time, you can now see it on the screen here. So let's dig into Enigmatic 82. Now you can actually see from the front of the plugin, you've got the 4 different eras of the amp. So you can see I'm in the suede. You see silver, cream, black. So I have a preset I called Alien Sky Hippie, which I'll explain. Has a bunch of fun stuff post effects, but I'm going to have that turned off for now. So we're going to just listen to the amp raw, and then I'm going to walk you some of the customizable circuit stuff. So here's the amp right now. So you can see I'm doing 2 unique things right now. I'm actually in the FET input, which you can now just see here. And I'm also using the internal overdrive of the amp. Without it, one other thing I'm doing is using the mid. Now to do that, that's what makes this customizable. Is in here, if I click that, you can see that I'm in the Skyline tone stack. That means Skyline had a mid bump and not a deep. So if I switch over to Classic, you'll notice that actually says deep now. So I've got a different sounding tone stack. A little boomy for me. If I go back to Skyline, it's going to enable that mid. Different sound. Now also, you can see the HRM circuit. You'll notice I took a little mid-range out and kind of played with the overdrive here just a little bit. I don't have a lot of drive, but I actually am pushing the front end a little bit. Plus the FET trim adds a little gain too. If I go to normal, go back to FET, I can even give us a little more of that FET gain by just pushing that up a hair. Now, I also have stuff hitting in the post section. So I've got a cool spring reverb I can turn on. I'm going to slowly bring this preset to life for you. There's my preset reverb sound. I also have the sort of trem in stereo. Now, here's where it gets weird. I also have dual flangers. So you can see I have dual selected. And if I turn this on, this is where you get the Sky Hippie. Also up here in these gray boxes, there's one little button there. If I hit that, I can shut off the whole post effects section, which is kind of cool when you're creating tones. Sometimes you just want to reference the amp, so. And then all the post effects. All right, so let's do a little bit more digging here. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of just the other 3 amps and why they sort of matter here. One thing about the suede is I love the openness of it, but I'm going to pull up a preset for you, and I'll show you something cool about the silver amp that I really like. All right, so I've got a preset up called the Gravitas Warm Strat. Sticking with this guitar. This is the sort of later 70s Santa Cruz era of these amps. One unique thing is I've matched it with a cabinet that's actually sitting behind me. It's an oversized 412 size cabinet. It's actually bigger and deeper than 412 and heavier because it's full of EV speakers. So one fun thing is it has a really unique, clean sound to it. So I'm going to play a little bit of this, and you'll see where I'm using this tone stack that doesn't have the Skyline. It's the classic EQ stack. It's fairly clean, not too jangly, but just enough of a percussive hit to sound cool. Very touch sensitive. It has just a little studio plate reverb on it. Really cool sound. Now, there are options back here. You can turn on the 1176. A lot of mix engineers might turn this on to get rid of a little of the transient response. So if I turn this on, I get a little bit of a clean sustain to the sound. All right, let's dig into the Cream amp. This gets us to the early 80s. We've got a little bit more of a refined lead sound. It's a little tighter. One of the cool things it has about it is a sound that when you pair it with a Tele or a Strat, you can actually get a pretty big round lead sound out of it. So that's using that HRM circuit, which really didn't show up till the 80s. So I've got it set up in here. You can see the customizable circuit. One thing I'm doing is slamming the front end. So I've got this on 10, master pulled back a little bit, and you can see I'm on that Skyline EQ. So one fun thing is this guitar does have a nice sort of lead sound paired with that ribbon mic. So. A lot of sustain too. It actually has this mid-range bloom to it. Now, one fun thing I added in the back, which again, we're going to get into more of this post-effects later, is I gave it sort of this 80s doubling sound. And that's actually using a micro pitch shifter. So if I did a rhythm track with this, which a lot of LA players had these for big pop records back then, you get sort of a one-track sound, one guitar sound, but it has sort of a big wide spread to it. So it's not really chorusing, but it's giving you that 80s spread. So for the last amp, which is the black one here, this is more of a 90s era, more aggressive gain, bigger sounding, but maybe I want to switch to humbucker, so I'm going to grab a different guitar. New guitar, last amp. Let's get into the black Enigmatic, which is around the early 90s or so, so there's a lot of gain on tap with this one. One fun thing is I do have the HRM dialed in, and just so you know, when I go into customize circuit, anytime you play with this HRM, it only applies to the overdrive. So you can play with this EQ section, but when you get out of the overdrive section, it pulls it out of the circuit completely. So if you have a good clean sound and your overdrive is too bright, you can just tailor the EQ on the overdrive. So, and you can see here by my settings, I pulled the treble back a lot just on the overdrive. So without the overdrive, even with these humbuckers here, with that overdrive on, here we go. really cool, big, warm overdrive with the humbuckers here. And these are PAF style, so they're not really that hot, honestly. All right, so now let me add the stuff in post to give you sort of the finished record quality sound of this tone. Over here, I have a little bit of an EQ upper mid-range. So I wanted the amp to have this sort of big warm sound, but sometimes you don't cut with that. So I have the upper mid-range and the MF section turned up. I've got a delay here, so there's our stereo. Just a little bit of a slap and the two speakers. And then a little studio reverb. All right, we're at Lion. Let me just start with what everyone wants to try is, classic rock stuff. And I love Lion for other things, but if you can't nail AC/DC, Van Halen, let's just say ZZ Top, some of the classic tones that are so raw that it kind of makes the riff sound wrong. So let me just start with one and you'll, by the end, guess what it is. Here we go. Here is the amp on its own. Cool. It's a little boomy and it doesn't have the sort of aggressive snarl. So what I did was re-EQ the mics a bit. So I've got a little bit more aggressive mids. But that's not it. The amp actually needs to respond a little differently. And that could have been Mr. Billy F. Gibbons' use of other things and maybe the pickup height and, other boosters. You'll never get a straight answer out of them, which is awesome. It's a mystery. So what I've done is add this little EQ in front. And if I turn this on, very simple, different part of the mid-range boost, which is making this Les Paul sort of have this aggressiveness. So here we go. That's it. We're done. Okay, I've changed guitars. This is actually one of my favorite guitars because you can kind of see it across the room for one thing. It also has a cool Floyd Rose. And one thing it does really well is sort of your Van Halen-esque sort of sounds. So this is the amp alone, plate studio reverb and back. And then what I'm going to do is add in 3 pieces that were usually attached to this sound, being a sort of phaser, a little tape echo, and sometimes a little boost from an EQ. So here's without it. Not bad. Now I'm going to go over here and turn on the pedal board. So over here you can see I've got slow phaser in vintage mode. There's actually 2 modes. The vintage one is the earliest one. It's very slow. It doesn't have that sort of disco chewiness of the later phasers. I've also got a tiny bit of slap echo from the AEP3. I've also turned on the preamp because that rolls a little bit of the harshness off using that pre. And also on this EQ, we've bumped a little bit of the mid-range, kind of like we did on that last preset where you're bumping mid-range to get aggressiveness and pokiness. So this should sound really cool now. If you have the phaser going, that reverb, you can kind of see how you immediately get that classic Brown sound. So let's move on to our next Lion tone. All right, let me talk about the last model in Lion of the 3, which again, we had the lead, we had the Brown, which is what we just did for the sort of Brown sound. And then the last one is the bass. Yes, you can put a bass into it, but the coolest thing about the bass amp version of the Lion is it's missing a bright cab. It's a little more high headroom. And so it's really great for using effects with. So I'm going to stick with the guitar. I also have a coil tap in here so I can get a cleaner sound. So on this sound here, my post stuff, I have a cool little analog chorus. And if I turn that off, you can hear a really nice sort of clean sound. I can actually turn up the volume a little more. And you can turn on something cool like the Brigade Chorus, and you get really cool, almost faux sort of rotating speaker sounds. So if you're looking for sort of a different sort of clean line in the bass mode, might be a ticket for you. All right, let's talk Ruby. And the two main amps that are inside there are a non-top boost from around 60, 61, and then a top boost from 63. So let me start on the top boost, which is also labeled Brilliant. In the post section, I've got a little bit of compression and a little bit of 224. The reason I have the compressor on is because I'm going to use the other side of this pick that's got a scratchy feel. So I'm going to scratch the strings and get that. That's not going to sound right until we do something else. So if I go to the front of the amp on the pedal board here, I have a digital delay. Now, the important thing is it's in sync mode. And this delay being in stereo lets me put two different musical values. I have a quarter note on the left and a dotted eighth on the right. Now, I have them coming down the center, so they're sitting on top of each other. So let me do this again. Now, if I want to actually change that, there's a really cool control in here over by the global area. You'll notice I have the pedal board on mono. If I put that to stereo, you're actually going to hear that delay send quarter left and dotted eighth right. So now check this out. You're going to hear a bounce between the two speakers. So up to you how you want to image that, but I'm going to stick it in mono. Leave that on there. So here you go. Now, one other thing about the sync mode is up here, I can also tap in a tempo. 125 is the classic Where the Streets sound is. So I can tap in something else. Also, if I click DAW, then whatever session you have up is going to go ahead and grab your software's tempo. Now, let's do one other thing. Let's talk about the normal channel. This is a weird setup. Normal channel is great, but you usually have to pair it with a distortion, overdrive, something to push the mids out. This channel is also really famous for being used as the sound of Queen, but you need to have a treble, mid-range booster. But let me show you internally, we give you the boost already. So I have it bypassed at the moment. Let me turn it down. So here, there's nothing on yet. Turning it on, doing it like halfway up. You can already tell just that mid-range boost and has no bass either is giving you the classic sound. All you have to do is turn the whole thing on 10. And you're starting to get into sort of that classic 70s Queen era sound. I'm going to turn the boost back off and show you what I did over here is I love vintage fuzzes. The problem is with this amp, the vintage fuzz has so much bottom and this amp has so much bottom that you need to carve it out. So I'll show you what I did here. Here's our vintage fuzz in a sputter setting. But I also use this EQ in a really weird setup, and you're going to hear the whole thing kind of get really pokey and fun. Now, outside of that, I can also come over here, and I set up a few post effects, a little trem, a little 224, and now we're going to have this really cool broken transistor weird sound, which actually sounds really musical. in a messed up way. Pretty broken. Okay, let's get to an amp that actually likes to take pedals in front of it sometimes. Showtime. Now, we did a long-form video of this a while back, so I'm going to show you some things that we did here that are unique to Paradise. One of the things I can do is actually turn off the cab completely and use Showtime's high headroom clean as just a DI sound. So I'm going to turn off my post effects here and sort of build you a cool sound around Showtime as a DI box. So here's my sound of the amp with no cab on it. Nothing crazy going on, but a nice big warm tube sound. Without that, you can hear how kind of thin it is. So now what I did was add a whole bunch of really cool sounds to use it sort of as an ambient machine. So first thing I did over here was add in a little compression. And then our vintage vibrato, which is new to Paradise. This has two modes, so if you've seen some of the old Boss VB2, this is sort of inspired by that very gentle, sort of slow-moving, out-of-tune C6 vibrato thing. It's also in stereo, so it's moving around in your speakers a little bit. The other thing we have here is our new digital reverb. But again, this is custom to Paradise. We have a space mode. So listen to that with the space reverb. Now, here's another thing. We originally had the sort of bucket memory man style delay in Starlight. We had a whole bunch of things in there hidden. So I have our pitch bent delay, which is called pitch shifting delay. And it actually has a mode where I can choose different musical intervals where the delay is going to swing around at. So if I can let you hear that by itself, you're going to hear the pitch go up a fifth and down. So if I play even just one note, I get a chord. If I start playing even just a basic major chord, and we can send that into space and vibrato it, you get a beautiful ambient pad. All right, so I'm going to stay on Showtime for one or two more sounds. One being the fact that I did mention this is cool for basses and specifically cool for things like the bass 6, which it looks like an oversized guitar. It is tuned to E to E, but it is in the bass range. So if I play a few classic 60s riffs with this sub, you'll know what it is. So the first sound of this sound, which is called Wichita Bass 6, I play without the tremolo. So if I use a pick and you palm mute, you get the classic sound. I'm playing the riff just a little differently. You know why. Later in the song, you get this same similar sound, but we get a little tremolo added. So you get this. So one of the cool things is when we did the Nashville shoot, if you go back and watch that, you'll see Buddy Miller with his down electro bass 6 sound. And he, again, loves the tremolo, the reverb. So I'll give you a little bit of that vibe here. All right, let me hit on Woodrow for a second. It's probably the most simple amp in the pile. It's a volume, basically, and a tone control. So you turn it up for distortion, you turn it down for clean. And this preset here, called Scream and Tweed, actually did something interesting, which is using the two screamers mid-range to push the amp into more distortion. It can get a little fuzzy and boomy. So here it is without that TS overdrive that we have in there. Now all I have to do is come over here. I'll enable the mid-range focused overdrive. Now you've got an almost tube fuzz with this mid-range, and then we can have some fun in post with it. Give it a little reverb, give it a little more high-end to make it sizzle, and then you've got a finished tone. Let's try one other thing. We can also change that and go for something different. So I'm going to pull up a pedal, one of my favorite ones here, called the Nashville Overdrive. This is based on the Noble sound. So I'm going to pull up one of my favorite settings here. Little drive, pull the spectrum back. It also has a cool bass cut. So. So interesting enough, that pedal pushes the tweed sound from being sort of fuzzy and crappy a little bit to almost sounding sort of British amp style. So one thing to remember is a lot of these tweed amps were sent to England and were the basis of a lot of the Marshall designs. So this overdrive paired with Woodrow is a really cool combo. So I think what we're going to do now is actually do some cool pairings of full signal paths. So I'm going to go through a few guitars, some of my favorite presets. We're going to pull out a Telly, we'll pull out some other fun guitars, and I'll give you a little look inside some classic tones. All right, let me show you some fun tones that are sort of inspired by some classics. So I've got a Telecaster here. This is a stock brand new one, right out of the box. And I've got one called Start My Telly. The fun thing is there's not really any pedals used on this song originally, but they did have a use of a kind of an ambient space that had a lot of pre-delay. And if you EQ it right with a little compression, you get this sort of classic sound. Like so. All right, here's a tone I kind of think of as an 80s throwback. DIs, we're compressing it with 1176s, but we're using a really cool thing we call the multi-chorus, which is new to Paradise. 6 little delay lines that spreads out your sound. So you get this kind of lush spread, but it's not wavy chorus. You use that on a DI sound, and you get this really cool throwback to those sort of vintage cleans. So I got a little plate reverb and a little studio EQ to give my guitar a little pop. So it kind of sounds like this. So if you really want to smell like chorus, we do a little bit of a faster waveform on this thing. And then you also get sort of the sounds of 80s goth stuff. I mean, you go see people like Susie and the Banshees and The Cure back in the 80s had the same kind of wobbly chorus sound. So this is a preset called Moonwalking, Telecaster still. Well, it was the first time I'd ever heard somebody using a compressor pedal to get sustain on a clean sound. It's also a clean sound using a lion. So big half stack sound, and then this sort of chorus flanging sound and tape echoes. So that with a little reverb, and you can play sort of a greatest hits of some of these sort of police-inspired songs. All right, one more with Telly. I call this Dandy Nash, and this is classic sort of Dynacomp red pedal Telly, a little analog slap spring reverb, Showtime for some high headroom. Hold on, because things are going to get twangy. All right, so here's a fun one. I used to hear this sound and think, how do you get that amp sound? And guess what? It wasn't an amp. Guy Tom Schultz, band Boston, used his own method to get the guitar direct into the console. So this is a bunch of crazy op-amp distortions, which we're going to use the raw pedal for. And then a lot of crazy filters to do this aggressive mid. And so I'm using Studio EQs as GE10s, and then a pitch shifter to make it sound doubled. So all of that to say it should sound pretty cool. Here's another one of my favorites based on a sort of mini Les Paul that Mr. Van Halen used to use with this really cool chorus. So the chorus had a sort of a long delay time, so it had a slappy thing. So I'll play a couple of the phrases here, and you'll probably guess what it is. So here's a fun sound you should try and get until I realized later it was a sort of lion-esque kind of sound, but also with this parked wah-wah thing, which means leaving a mid-range filter cranked and sort of pokey. So I'm recreating that for you. And also with the lion sort of back end and a little plate reverb and a little micro pitch, which is new for Paradise here. You can see it here, just a couple of cents off of one side to give an image. So here we go. Here's another fun one when I figured out the use of compression, but also with a little bit of delay and sort of the 80s chorusing, but also working on my rhythm technique. So you have to play these really cool staccato type of rhythms with this sound with the compressor. You get this really punchy thing. So I'll just play it for you and see if you can figure it out. So here's another fun one that I kind of think of as a 90s tone, which is using sort of the 70s fuzzes, like it's kind of inspired by these Big Muff Pie fuzzes. And then you sort of scoop out the mid-range a little bit. I have the tone stack off on this fuzz, but I also kind of gave you the right EQ curve with the GE10 sound. Again, play some octaves and some rhythm, and you kind of get that sound. So as much as I like playing what's inspired by tones, sometimes I want to play with something that I can just kind of play my guitar alone with, and getting these sort of sparkly sounds with sort of ambient, church spacey, memory, man, analog delays, washes. It's fun when you're playing chords and kind of writing stuff. So here's another way. So we're going to use Ruby for the sparkly part, a little compression and analog delays and a beautiful space reverb. Over that white noise back there is the fact that I got a lot of gain back there. I've got a guitar that's also pretty noisy, single coils, but I do want to use this high gain sound. So we have a gate in there that does actually trigger off the clean DI and applies it after the amplifier. You don't have to do anything to move that. All you got to do is actually just set the little threshold. So there's an easy way to do it on screen here. I enable it, but then I can actually also hit these ellipses, and then you can see a few extra little tweaky things. But essentially, if I leave my volume on 10, you can kind of see where that threshold is. So kind of like right there is probably good enough for me. And I can see the sort of stuff bubbling down there. So now I've got the... No problem. Without it... solved. One other thing we should talk about is the output. There's another thing at the back end called limit. What limit will do is stop you from clipping your DAW itself. So if you have a limit on, it's not going to do anything until you get almost to 0. And it's just going to stop you from, clipping your DAW software. All right, a couple of other secret things hidden in there. We have a tuning fork, which means tuning. We put a really cool new tuner in here. It is super high accuracy. So if you want to do the intonation on your guitars, you could do it on here. So I have a few things. First is the mute control. So I can mute or I can take the mute out. Nailed it after that. One other cool feature is mini tuner. That means if this is open, that's fine. You'll see the same thing, but when I close it, at the top left here, you'll always see if you're in tune or not. So you can see right up there, it's telling me my A's in tune. So I can leave that running the whole time and spot check things, not have to worry about it. I'm a little flat. I would suggest muting it when you're around your band because no one wants to hear that. But in this case, if you're recording at home, it's great to have the mini tuner going. Thanks for joining me here today to look at Paradise Guitar Studio. There's a lot more in there. There are hundreds more presets, many that are just creative sounds based on cool effects and cool ideas for music. I hope you make your own. I hope you find something that inspires you to play and make your own songs up. Do it with bass sixes, do it with keyboards, put drums to it, vocals, whatever. It's just a fun way to hopefully feel inspired. I sit in this room all day making up sounds. I hope you get to have fun going in here and making up sounds of your own. Good luck. We'll see you next time.